Hello again. Tonight's story is about Effie Nolan, a 22-year-old linguistics student who thinks out loud into an old tape recorder, and Professor Rhea Sinclair, the cold, exact woman who studies the difference between what people say and what they mean. Effie meant to send one very embarrassing voice note to her best friend. She sent it to her professor instead. What begins as the worst mistake of her life slowly becomes a story about being heard, and about how the most guarded woman in the room learns to stop translating herself into something safer. The message said delivered 9:42. Under it, in small gray letters, it said, Professor R. Sinclair. I read those 2 lines maybe 40 times, standing in the stairwell of the linguistics building with rain coming sideways off the moor and my thumb hovering over a screen that could not, under any law of physics I understood, be showing me the truth. Because the voice note I had just sent was 11 minutes long. It was meant for my best friend Tamsin. And it was, from the first breath to the last, about Professor Rhea Sinclair, specifically about the exact shade of her eyes, the exact way she said the word adequate, like it was a small mercy, and the fact that I was, and I am quoting my own recorded voice here, so catastrophically in love with a woman who has never once looked at me on purpose, that I have started dreaming in her handwriting. 11 minutes, delivered to her. I want to be clear that I did not scream in the stairwell. I am British and we save our screaming for the privacy of the shower and the death of the monarchy. What I did was sit down very slowly on the 3rd step, put the phone face down on my knee like it was a wounded animal, and say out loud to no one, okay, this is a life you can leave. That was the plan for about 4 seconds. Then my phone buzzed. Quick note before we begin. If you want the hotter, uncensored version of stories like this, I share them on my Patreon, GL After Hours. The link's in the description, for whenever you want to stay a little longer inside the story. Let me back up. I should tell you about the tape recorder first, because everything that happened is, in the end, the tape recorder's fault, and I refuse to carry the blame alone. It was my dad's. A little orange handheld thing, the size of a deck of cards, with a cracked corner and one button worn smooth and pale from 30 years of a thumb that was not mine. He recorded people for a living. Oral histories, old fishermen, women who remembered the mill before it closed. And he used to say the truest thing a person owned was the sound of their own voice when they'd forgotten to arrange it. He died when I was 17. I inherited the recorder, his record collection, and the specific and incurable habit of thinking out loud into a machine. Where other people have a diary, I have 400 and some voice notes. Where other people take a breath and count to 10, I press a worn orange button and ramble until the fear runs out of the room. Most of them are nonsense. Buy oats. The word moist is fine. Everyone needs to calm down. If I die, Tamsin gets the records but not the Nina Simone. That's going to my cousin. She'll understand. I send the good ones to Tam, who has learned to listen to me the way you listen to weather, patiently and with an umbrella. So when I say I recorded 11 minutes about my linguistics professor at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night and meant to send it to my best friend, I need you to understand that this was not unusual. This was Tuesday. The only unusual thing was the name at the top of the thread when my thumb came down. I had 2 Sinclairs in my phone. Tamsin Sinclair, my best friend since we were 11, and bonded over a shared and militant hatred of group projects. And Professor R. Sinclair, whose number was in my phone because she had 3 weeks earlier, made the entire seminar submit our recorded fieldwork directly to her. And I had saved the contact so I would stop calling her the terrifying one in front of witnesses. 2 Sinclairs, 1 thumb, a universe with a sense of humor so dry it could start fires. Here's the thing about Professor Rhea Sinclair that you need to know, and I'm going to try to say it without my voice doing the thing it does. She was a visiting professor, 6 months only, on loan from somewhere colder and more important, brought in to teach a single seminar on semantics and phonetics, the study, more or less, of what words mean and how the mouth makes them. She was 39. She wore gray, the way other people wore armor. She had dark hair pinned back so precisely that on windy days the wind simply gave up. And she had a scar a faint vertical line through the outer edge of one eyebrow, so pale you only saw it when the light came from the left, which meant I had spent an unholy amount of time engineering reasons to sit on the left. She was cold. I want to be fair to her and also honest with you. She was genuinely, professionally, load-bearingly cold. She graded in red fountain pen, a dark green pen, red ink, a contradiction I thought about more than was healthy. And her comments were short and surgical and correct in a way that made you want to lie down. This is a feeling, not an argument. You have confused clearly with true. Say less, mean more. The other students called her the glacier. One of them, a boy named Marcus who peaked in the first week and had been sliding gently downhill ever since, said she'd never once smiled at a semicolon. And everyone laughed. And I laughed too. And then I went home and lay on the floor because I had realized, roughly a month in, that I would have set myself on fire for one. That was the situation. A cold woman who studied meaning. A warm mess who couldn't stop making it. And 400 voice notes standing by, loaded and unsafe. I remember the first day she walked into the seminar, because I catalog beginnings the way other people photograph their food, and because this one turned out to be one. We'd had a substitute the first week. The regular lecturer had gone on sabbatical to write a book nobody would read. And we were expecting more of the same. Some tired postdoc with a lanyard and a cough. Instead, the door opened at 9 exactly. Not a minute before, not a minute after, and a woman in a gray coat came in out of the rain without a single drop on her, which I have never been able to explain to this day, and set one index card on the lectern and looked at 22 of us as though we were a sentence she was deciding whether to keep. "My name is Professor Sinclair," she said. "I study meaning, specifically the distance between what a person says and what they actually mean, which is the only interesting distance there is." She uncapped a dark green pen. "You'll find I'm not warm. You'll survive it. Warmth is what people offer when they can't offer accuracy, and I would rather be accurate. Take out your recorders." And I need you to understand the specific horror of this. I already had my recorder out. My dad's orange one, cracked corner, sitting on the desk in front of me because I always have it out. And her eyes went to it, one flick, and stayed for half a second longer than they stayed on anything else in the room. "Good," she said. "Someone who already listens for a living." And she moved on. And I spent the next 50 minutes trying to remember how lungs are supposed to work. That was it. That was the whole crime scene. A cold woman said one warm adjacent thing about a machine my father left me, and my entire interior architecture quietly picked up and moved house. I would love to report that I fought it. I did not fight it. Capital O, question mark, and she has never once let me forget it. That is the earliest card in the catalog, the gray coat with no rain on it, the green pen, red ink, the distance between what you say and what you mean, which she named on the first morning like a warning she assumed I was too young to hear. The first time she spoke to me directly, really to me, not to the room, was 6 weeks before the stairwell. She kept me back after seminar. She said Nolan, which was how she said everyone's surname. Flat, a full stop with a person attached. She was holding my fieldwork transcript, and there was red on it, and my whole nervous system prepared for death. "Your analysis is sentimental," she said. "Right," I said. "Yes. Sorry. Don't apologize for it yet. I haven't finished." She set the pages down and looked at me for what was, I would later confirm by re-listening to my own panicked memory of it, the first time. Gray eyes, not warm, but not bored either, which I hadn't known to hope for. "You hear things other people miss," she said. "You notice the woman in your recording changed her vowels when she talked about her late husband. That's real. That's an ear. And then you buried it under 3 paragraphs of your own feelings about grief, as though I asked how you felt. You didn't. I didn't." She recapped her pen. Click. "You have an instrument and you keep playing it with the lid closed. It's irritating." She paused. "It's also rare. Fix the first thing, keep the second." And then she picked up her coat, gray wool, collar she always turned up against the corridor draft, and left. And I stood in the empty seminar room holding a page that said, in red, in the margin, in her impossible narrow hand, more of this, less of you. I want to tell you I took it as the professional note it was. Instead, I walked home in the rain, composing a voice note to Tamsin that began, "So I think I need to drop out and move to the sea," and ended 11 minutes later, with me admitting the truth for the first time out loud, which is a dangerous thing to do into a machine that keeps. The tutoring started because I asked for it, and I asked for it because I am, at my core, a person who cannot leave a bruise unpressed. Final year students could request extra supervision hours. I requested them from her, Bernie, the department administrator, 60s, cardigan for every weather, the kind of woman who had watched 40 years of clever people be stupid about each other and had stopped being surprised around 1994, looked at my form, looked at me over her glasses and said, "You're sure." Her. Not a question. A courtesy. A last exit before the toll road. "I want to get better," I said, which was 60% true, which is a passing grade. Said Bernie, and stamped it, and as I left, she said to my back, mild as milk, "She likes the ones who work, just so you're not waiting for something else." I pretended not to hear her, which is the closest I come to dignity. Thursday evenings, 5 o'clock, her office. One window that looked out over the moor going purple, a wall, an entire wall, of index cards, hundreds of them, pinned in a system only she understood, each one a word or a phrase in her narrow hand. A dying plant she refused to either save or discard. 2 chairs. And always, a pot of tea gone cold beside her, because she made it and then forgot it, and then drank it cold at the end like a punishment she'd earned. The first Thursday, she took my transcript apart line by line for 50 minutes and did not once make me feel small while doing it, which I hadn't known was possible. At 5 to 6, she said, "You talk to yourself when you think. I can see you doing it. Stop hiding it. Do it out loud. I want to hear the working, not the answer." "You want me to just ramble at you?" "I want you to think in front of me," she said, "instead of performing having already thought." She uncapped the green pen. "It's the same instruction as before. Open the lid." So I did. I thought out loud in her cold office with the moor going dark, and she listened, actually listened, the way my dad listened, the way almost no one listens. And every so often she said there, quietly, when I stumbled into something true, and I started living, God help me, for the there. By the 4th Thursday, I had a catalog. I couldn't help it. It's what I do. I collect the details of a person the way other people collect stamps, and I had started collecting her without permission, mine or hers. The silver watch on her left wrist, thin, old, the band worn. The way, when she was deciding whether to say a hard thing, her thumb moved once across the watch band, back and forth, a single stroke, like winding a clock that had stopped. The green pen, the scar through the eyebrow, left light only. The scent of her office, which was cold tea and cedar and something like rain on stone. The specific flat music of Nolan, the coat, the collar, the plant, and the tea she never drank hot. And one more, which I noticed on the 4th Thursday and did not tell Tamsin, because I didn't have language safe enough to hold it. She had started making 2 cups. She made the tea, forgot it, drank hers cold, and set the second one down at my side of the desk, without a word, without looking, as though it had always been there. I never once saw her decide to do it. It simply began, and then it was true, and neither of us mentioned it. And I drank cold tea on Thursdays and told myself it meant nothing. The way you tell yourself the sun means nothing, standing in it. Why was she being kind to me? I asked the recorder that once, at 2 in the morning. The recorder, wisely, said nothing. By the end of that first month of Thursdays, I had, twice, decided to tell her. The first time, I got as far as the door of her office with a whole sentence built and rehearsed. I'd recorded 3 drafts of it, which is a deranged thing to do, I'm aware. And she looked up and said, "You're standing in the doorway breathing like you're about to sit an exam. "Sit down or leave, Nolan. The draft in here is atrocious." And the sentence evaporated out of my head like steam off cold tea, and I sat down and talked about vowels for an hour instead. The second time was worse because I actually started. We'd finished early, and there was a softness in the room, and I said, "Can I ask you something that isn't about linguistics?" And her whole body did a small precise thing, a stillness, like a woman who has heard the first note of a song she's already decided not to dance to. And she said, "You can ask. I reserve the right not to answer." And I opened my mouth, and what came out? I want to be very clear that I had planned to say something brave. What came out was, "Do you prefer the green pen for a reason?" She looked at me for a long moment, and something almost sorry crossed her face, like she knew exactly what I'd swapped out at the last second. "My sister gave it to me," she said, "before we stopped speaking. I use it because I refuse to let her ruin a good pen on top of everything else." And then, gently, in a way that took the legs out from under me, "Was that the question you actually meant to ask?" "No," I said. "I know," she said. And she didn't make me say the real one. I have never been more grateful to be let off a hook I desperately wanted to be caught on. I told Tamsin both of these disasters the same night, back to back, in a single voice note that ran, I checked, 9 minutes. And Tam's entire reply was, "You recorded 3 drafts of a confession and then asked her about her pen. Effie, my love, you are going to send that woman something by accident one day, and it is going to be the truest thing you have ever done, because your subconscious has more spine than the rest of you combined." I want it formally on the record that Tamsin said this, weeks before the stairwell. She is insufferable about it now. She has, on more than one occasion, referred to herself as the Oracle. I let her, because she was right, and being right is the only currency she accepts. There was a Thursday, the 5th, I think, though by then I'd stopped numbering them out loud because Tamsin had started making a face, when I knocked something over. This is not a small category of event for me. I am a person of great enthusiasm and poor spatial reasoning. I have a documented history with door frames. On this particular Thursday, I reached for the second cup of tea, the one that had simply started appearing at my place, and I caught the edge of a stack of index cards instead, and 200 of them went across the floor of her office like the world's most academic avalanche. I said a word my father would have recorded for posterity. Then I was on my knees on the cold floor, grabbing at cards, saying, "I'll sort them, I'll put them back, just tell me the system. Is there a system? Please tell me there's a system." And she came round the desk and knelt down opposite me, close, closer than the 2 chairs had ever allowed us to be. And she didn't say anything for a moment. She just picked up a card and turned it over and read it, and something crossed her face. "There's no system," she said. "I tell people there's a system so they won't touch them. They're just things I've heard, things people meant that they didn't say." She held one up. It said in her narrow hand, "I'm fine," falling tone. "The woman at the bakery Tuesday." She held up another. "Stay, my grandmother." She never actually said it. I wrote down that she didn't. She looked at the wall, then back at me, on the floor, surrounded by 200 unspoken things. "It isn't a filing system, Nolan. It's just proof I was paying attention. To people who mostly weren't paying attention back." We were very close. Her sleeve had ridden up, and I could see the silver watch in the worn band, and her thumb was moving across it back and forth, and I understood I was being shown something that cost her, and that she was watching to see what I'd do with it. And what I did was pick up a card near my own knee and read it before I could stop myself, and it said, in fresh ink, dated that term, "The terrifying one," Nolan said to make her friends laugh, meant something else entirely. I looked up. She was already looking at me. Neither of us said a single word, and the rain went on against the window, and I put the card very carefully into my own hand, and I did not give it back, and she watched me not give it back and let me keep it.
If this story stayed with you, hit subscribe so the next one can find you. Stay close.
Which brings us back, the long way round, to the stairwell, and the 11 minutes, and the phone buzzing on my knee. I turned it over the way you check a bandage you already know is bad. One new message, Professor R. Sinclair. It said, "My office. Now." 3 words, a full stop after each, because of course she punctuated her hostage demands. I have never in my life climbed 2 flights of stairs so slowly. I passed Bernie's door, and she looked up, and something in my face made her put her pen down, and she said gently, "Oh, love," which is the sound a person makes when they can see the whole crash from the top of the hill. And I kept walking because the only thing worse than the meeting was the pity in the corridor. Her door was open. She was sitting behind the desk with her hands folded, and my voice note. I could see it, the little gray bar of it. 11 minutes and 13 seconds, paused, glowing on the phone in front of her. "Sit down, Nolan," she said. I did not sit down. I stood in the doorway and said at speed, "I need you to know that was a technical error. There are 2 Sinclairs. It's a documented phone issue. I've read about it. I'm going to report it I will find the correct authority. And I am so deeply, I cannot stress. I'll withdraw from the seminar. I'll withdraw from the university. I'll withdraw from the county. Nolan, I have family in a different county. Effie." And that stopped me. Because in 6 weeks of Thursdays and a whole term of seminars, she had never once, not one single time, called me by my first name. The room was very quiet. She turned the phone around so the screen faced me. 11 minutes and 13 seconds, the little bar, my whole heart in a gray line. "I've listened to it," she said. The whole 3 times, she said. And there was nothing on her face, which was the most frightening thing that had ever happened to me. More frightening than the words, because I had learned to read her small weather, and there was no weather at all. "I want to check that I understood you correctly. You understand that's my field. Understanding what people mean." Her thumb moved once across the watch band, back and forth, winding the stopped clock. "So I'm going to say what I heard, and you're going to tell me if I misheard. Yes?" I could not speak, so I nodded, which is a thing you can do when your voice has left the building. "You said you noticed the way I say adequate. You said you sit on the left because of a scar you shouldn't be able to see. You said..." And here for the first time something moved, a hairline thing at the corner of her mouth gone before I could name it. "You said you have started dreaming in my handwriting." She set the phone down. "Did I mishear any of that?" "No," I said. It came out cracked. "You have a very good ear." "I know," she said. "It's my one talent." And she looked at me, and the cold was still there, but it had changed state somehow, the way ice changes when you hold it. And she said the sentence that I have replayed more times than any recording I own. "I'm not going to pretend I didn't hear you, Effie. I've spent my whole life listening to what people bury. I'm not going to bury this one for you to make it easier. You said a true thing by accident. Now say it on purpose or take it back. But choose." I did not choose. That night. I want to be honest about that because the version where I was brave is a nicer story, and it isn't the one that happened. What happened is that I said, "You're leaving in 6 weeks," which was true and cowardly, and also the only lifeboat in the room. She was a visiting professor. At the end of term, she went back to the colder, more important place. Everyone knew it. The department had a countdown to it, though no one said so out loud. And she looked at me and I'll give her this forever. She didn't argue. She didn't say the gap didn't matter or that she was my supervisor or any of the 1,000 true and disqualifying things. She just said, "Yes, I am." And then, quieter, in a voice I hadn't heard her use, the one under the surgical one, "That's not the same as no. You know that's not the same as no." It feels like a very organized no. "I'm a very organized person," she said. And there it was again, the hairline thing at the corner of her mouth. And I understood that Professor Rhea Sinclair had, in her fashion, just made a joke, and that I was in enormous trouble. She stood. She picked up her coat. Gray wool, collar turned up. At the door she paused, and without looking back, in the flat voice she said, "The recording, I'm keeping it." A beat. "You can report the phone issue to whatever authority you like, but I'm keeping it." And she left, and I stood in her cold office next to a cup of tea she'd made me out of habit, and I did not feel rejected, and I did not feel safe, and I have never in my life felt more precisely heard. I called Tamsin from the stairwell. The same stairwell. I have a relationship with that stairwell now. We've been through things. And I told her everything, and there was a long silence. And then Tam said, "So, let me get this straight. You accidentally confessed." She listened 3 times. She said, "Say it on purpose." And you said, "You're leaving." Yes. Effie, my love, light of my life, you absolute coward. I'm protecting us both. You're protecting yourself and calling it chivalry, said Tam, who has known me since we were 11 and does not accept my nonsense as legal tender. She kept the tape, Effie. Cold women do not keep the tape. Cold women delete the tape and pretend the phone was off. She kept it. A pause. What are you actually scared of? And I stood in the stairwell with the rain coming off the moor, and I told the truth to my best friend instead of a machine. For once. That she's gonna leave anyway, I said, and that it'll be so much worse to have had it than to have wanted it. Tam was quiet for a moment. Then she said the thing I've kept. Yeah, she said. That's the deal, though. That's the whole deal. You don't get the version where it doesn't cost anything. Nobody does. And then, because she is who she is. Also, she sounds terrifyingly hot, and if you don't kiss her, I will. And I am not a linguist. I will have nothing to say to her. It'll be humiliating for everyone. The next Thursday, I almost didn't go. I stood outside the linguistics building for 11 minutes. I checked later, I am who I am. And then Bernie opened the door from the inside because she'd seen me from her window. And she said, "You'll catch your death out here. And then she'll have to find someone else to be foolish about. And frankly, she doesn't have the time." She held at the door. "Go up, love." "Bernie," I said, has she ever? "I've worked with that woman at 3 universities across 19 years, Bernie said, "and I have watched her be brilliant and impossible and alone in a way she chose on purpose because being heard cost her something once, badly, and she decided the price was too high." She looked at me. And then she started making 2 cups of tea on Thursdays. I noticed everything. It's the job. She nudged me toward the stairs. "I'm not telling you it'll end well. I'm telling you she made 2 cups. Do with that what you can live with." I went up. The door was open. The second cup was already at my place, steam still on it. She'd made it fresh this time, not forgotten. And that small change undid me more than any speech could have. She looked up from her index cards. "You're late," she said. 11 minutes. And I realized she'd been counting too. We didn't talk about the recording, that Thursday or the next. We worked. That was the strange mercy of her. She let the enormous thing sit in the corner of the room like weather, while we did the small true work of taking sentences apart. And somewhere in the taking apart, the distance between the 2 chairs got smaller by degrees I could not have measured but felt in my teeth. On the first of those Thursdays, she asked me about my father. She did it the way she did everything. Sideways, precisely, without warning. We were working through a recording, and I'd flinched at a man's voice on the tape. And she noticed, because she noticed everything. And she set the pen down and said, "The recorder. It was his, not a question. How did you hold it differently than you hold anything else. You hold your pen like it owes you money. You hold that like it might stop breathing." She folded her hands. "You don't have to tell me. I'm only saying I noticed. It seemed unfair to notice and then pretend I hadn't. I've built an entire career on that particular unfairness, and I find I'm tired of it. In this room." So I told her. About the oral histories, the fishermen, the millwomen, the smooth pale button worn down by a thumb that wasn't mine, the sound of a voice when it's forgotten to arrange itself. She listened the whole way through, and at the end she didn't say she was sorry, which I was grateful for, because everyone says they're sorry and it accomplishes nothing. Instead, she said, "So that's why you can hear it, the change in the vowels, the falling tone. You were raised by a man who listened for the truth underneath the arrangement." Her thumb moved once across the watch band. "It's the best inheritance I've ever heard of. Most people just get furniture." I laughed, wet and surprised, and she almost the corner of her mouth, and she said, "He'd have hated me, I think. Warm man, warm work. And here's his daughter being foolish about a glacier." And I said, "He'd have recorded you." And she went very still and said quietly, "Yes, he probably would have. That's a much kinder thing to say than you know." And she picked the pen back up, and we went back to work. But something in the room had moved a whole chair closer, and we both felt it, and neither of us moved it back. On the second of those Thursdays, we nearly crossed a line that neither of us had drawn, which is the most dangerous kind. She was showing me something in a transcript, leaning over the desk, and I leaned in to see, and our hands were on the page at the same time, close, not touching. A single centimeter of cold office air between one of my fingers and one of hers, and neither of us moved. That was the whole event. 2 hands on a page, not touching, for a length of time that stopped being accidental somewhere in the middle and became a decision we were both making by refusing to make it. I could hear my own pulse. I catalogued helplessly at close range. The silver watch, the worn band, the faint scar catching the light because, for once, I was near enough that it reached the right side of her face too. Cold tea and cedar. The specific stillness of a woman holding herself very precisely in place. Her thumb was not moving across the watch band. It had stopped, and I've come to understand that with her, the stopped thumb was louder than any word she owned. It meant the whole machine of her was running so hard on holding still that there was nothing left over for the tell. "Nolan," she said, finally, without moving her hand. Just my surname, flat, except her voice had gone somewhere lower than the surgical register, down into the one underneath it, a question with no question in it. "Yes," I said, to the same nothing she'd asked. And then she straightened up, unhurried, exact, and recapped the green pen. Click, the sound of a door being closed gently and on purpose, and said, "It's 6 o'clock. You should go. The draft gets worse after dark, and I refuse to be held responsible for your lungs." And I went, because she'd given me the exit, and it would have been cruel to both of us not to take it. But at the door, I looked back, and she was sitting very still in the lamplight, with 2 cold cups of tea in front of her, looking at the small stretch of desk where our hands had almost been. And I understood that the perimeter we were keeping was not indifference. It was the exact opposite of indifference. It was the most careful one I had ever stood near, and it was being held in place on purpose by both of us, because we both already knew what it would cost to stop holding it. On the 3rd Thursday after the stairwell, the rain was bad enough that the window rattled, and I was mid-ramble about a recording, thinking out loud, lid open, the way she'd taught me. And I said something, I don't even remember what. Some small stumbled into true thing about how people say, "I'm fine," with a falling tone when they mean it and a rising tone when they're asking you to notice they're not. And she said, "There," quiet, the way she did. And I looked up to say something clever, and she was already looking at me. Not correcting, not grading, just looking, with the cold gone out of it entirely. And her thumb was moving across the watch band, back and forth, winding the stopped clock. And she said, "I've been trying to decide something for 3 weeks, back and forth. You made it very difficult by being right about tone. It's hard to stay guarded around someone who can hear you." She set the pen down. "I'm going to say a true thing on purpose now. You should know I'm not good at it. I've spent 20 years making sure no one could catch me meaning something." "Rhea," I said. Her first name. I'd never said it. It felt like stepping off a curb in the dark. "I heard you," she said, "in the recording. All 11 minutes. And the thing I keep replaying isn't the part about my eyes or the scar, though I'll admit I've thought about the scar. The corner of her mouth. It's the part where you said you'd started dreaming in my handwriting, because I understood exactly what you meant. You meant I'd gotten into the way you think." She looked at me. "You should know it's mutual. You've gotten into the way I think. I mark other people's essays and hear your voice noticing what I missed. It's extremely inconvenient. I'd like it to continue. You've reached the part where wanting turns into something more. If you want the hotter, uncensored GL scenes, they're on my Patreon, GL After Hours. Details in the description. Now, back to Effie, who was learning that the most careful woman in the room had been keeping something warm the whole time and had simply never let anyone close enough to feel it. I crossed the room. Or she did. Honestly, the geography of it is the one part I can't reconstruct. And I've tried, and I've decided some moments refuse to be transcribed on purpose. Because they're not for the record, they're only for the two people in them. Her hand came up to the side of my face, and her thumb, the same thumb that wound the stopped clock, that capped the green pen, moved once across my cheekbone, careful, like she was checking I was real, or like she was deciding, one last time, whether to. And I said, "You're allowed," which is not romantic, which is the least poetic thing a linguist has ever said. And she made a sound that was almost a laugh, and she said, "I know, I'm slow, it's the field. I have to be sure what I mean before I say it." "And are you? Sure what you mean?" "For once," she said, "yes." And she kissed me the way she did everything, unhurried, exact every second paid for, and the whole cold-ordered room went quiet and warm around us, and the rain hit the window, and somewhere on the desk a cup of tea went cold that neither of us would ever get to. When she pulled back, she rested her forehead against mine. The collar of her coat was down, I noticed. She'd taken it off. When had she taken it off? And she said, very quietly, into the small space between us, "This is going to be complicated." Her thumb, at my jaw, did not move away. "I'm still leaving. I'm still your supervisor until the end of term. I don't know how to do this in a way that doesn't cost something." "Nothing good is free," I said. "Tamsin taught me that. Well, Tamsin in Greek." "That's the most useful thing you've ever said to me," said Rhea Sinclair, "and I'm including your entire body of coursework." And I laughed against her mouth. And for 6 days, I let myself believe it was going to be simple. "I'll give you one of the 6 days because I kept it, and because you've earned a soft thing before the hard part." It was a Sunday, and she was not my professor on a Sunday, and we went, her idea, which surprised me, to the secondhand record shop on the far side of the city, the one down the steps that smells of dust and other people's decades. She said she wanted to watch me choose. "You catalog," she said. "I'd like to see you do it with something that isn't a person for once." I chose badly and enthusiastically, pulling out sleeves, talking too much, and she followed one step behind with her hands in the pockets of the gray coat, not buying anything, just watching. And every so often she'd take a record out of my stack and turn it over and read the back with the exact attention she gave a bad essay, and put it back. Or not. She kept a Nina Simone. She didn't explain it. I didn't ask. At the counter, she paid before I could, which caused a small argument conducted entirely in eyebrows. And outside it had started to rain, because of course it had. And she turned up her collar, gray wool, and I said, "You do that 100 times a day, and it takes 10 years off my life every single time. I need you to know that. It's a real medical situation. I've considered seeing someone." And she looked at me for a moment on the wet steps with the record tucked under her arm, and she said, "You narrate everything, out loud, constantly." "I know, it's the machine. It's genetic. I'm sorry." I didn't say stop. She started walking, and I fell in beside her, and she said, to the middle distance, in the flat, precise voice she saved for the truest things, "My whole life, people have arranged themselves before they'd let me hear them. Colleagues, family, every clever, guarded person in every clever, guarded room. And you leave the machine running. You let me hear the working, not the answer. You have no idea how loud the quiet has been." She stopped walking. She didn't finish the thought. She just took my hand on the wet steps in the open, where anyone could have seen a visiting professor and a final-year student, and she held it, and she said, "This is the part I don't know how to keep, so I'm memorizing it, in case." And I should have heard the warning folded into that. I was too happy to hear it. That is the whole trouble with happiness. It's the one condition that makes you a worse listener. It was not simple. I want to tell you it was, but you've been kind enough to stay this long, and you deserve the true version. The complication had a name, and the name was Marcus. Not through malice, I want to be fair, even now, but through the specific carelessness of a person who has never once had to be quiet. He'd requested his own supervision hours, been turned down for scheduling, and gone to complain to another faculty member that Professor Sinclair played favorites, that the Nolan girl got 2 hours a week in evening slots, and who knows what else. He said it in a corridor. He said it loudly. He said it, as it happened, 4 feet from Bernie's open door. And here's the part that still tightens something under my ribs. It wasn't even a lie. That was what made it dangerous. She did give me evening slots. She did make me tea. The true things were the ones that could end her, and I had spent my whole life believing true things were the safe ones. Bernie found me in the corridor the morning it started to move. She didn't stamp anything. That's how I knew it was bad. Bernie stamps when the world is behaving. "Walk with me," she said, and we went down to the little kitchen where the faculty pretend the biscuits are communal, and she put the kettle on, and she said, without looking at me, "I've watched this happen before. Twice. Both times, the woman was the one who paid, not the student. The student gets a story to tell at parties for the rest of her life. The woman gets a file." She took down 2 mugs. "I'm not telling you to stop feeling what you feel. I gave that particular advice up around the same time I gave up on the biscuits being communal. I'm telling you, she has spent 19 years being untouchable precisely so that no one could ever do to her career what one careless boy in a corridor is about to try to do in an afternoon, and she'll let it happen. She'll go quiet and cold and correct, and she'll let it. Because she decided a long time ago that being wanted out loud was a luxury she was not allowed to afford. She handed me a mug. You're the first thing in 19 years I've watched her risk it for, which also makes you the first thing that can cost her all of it. Both of those are true at the same time, love. That's the whole rotten miracle of the situation." She took a sip of her tea. "Now, you didn't hear a word of that from me. I'm only an old woman who stamps forms." The faculty member was obliged to mention it. There was a word used, review. A soft, procedural, terrifying word. Nothing formal, nothing filed. Just a quiet question raised in a quiet office about a visiting professor with 6 weeks left and a student who sat on the left. And Rhea, who had spent 20 years making sure no one could catch her meaning anything, got caught meaning something. And I watched the cold come back over her, like a tide reclaiming a beach. And I understood, finally, what Bernie had meant. Being heard had cost her once, badly. And I had just made it cost her again. She ended it in the office, on a Thursday, with 2 fresh cups of tea going cold between us, which is the detail that undoes me even now. "There's nothing to review," she said, flat, surgical. The voice from the first day, the armor back on and buckled. "There's been no misconduct. I'll say so, they'll agree, it'll go away. But it goes away faster if there's nothing to find. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" "You're telling me to sit on the right?" I said. "I'm telling you, I have 6 weeks left in a career I built out of being untouchable, and I let myself be touched, and now I'm reminded why I didn't." Her thumb did not move across the watch band. It lay still, which was worse. This was a mistake, not the feeling. I won't insult us both by pretending the feeling was the mistake. The mistake was thinking I could afford it. "Rhea, Professor Sinclair," she said, and it was the cruelest thing she could have done, and she did it precisely. Because she knew it would work. Because she'd learned my weather too. "You should submit your final coursework to the department, not to me. It's cleaner. You've been my best student. That's the version that's true and survives being said out loud." She picked up her coat, gray wool, collar up. At the door she stopped, and for 1 second her hand was on the frame, and I thought, I let myself think. And then she said without turning, "Take the recording back, I shouldn't have kept it. I'll delete it if you'd rather." And she left. I sat in the cold office, 2 cups of tea, and I did the coward's arithmetic, and I decided she was right. And I went home and did not press the orange button for 9 days, because the one person I wanted to think out loud to was the one I'd stopped being allowed to reach. 9 days. I counted. I am who I am. I'll tell you what those days were, because misery skipped is only misery that comes back later with interest. I went to my last few seminars and I sat on the right, which she'd asked for, and it turns out the right side of that room is a foreign country. I couldn't see the scar. I could see her clearly, all of her, the whole cold professional surface, and not one flicker of the thing underneath that I'd taught myself to read from the left. It was like being handed back a person with the sound turned off. She was flawless. She was untouchable. She graded my final seminar contribution precise, well heard. In green pen, red ink, no first name, and I put the page in a drawer and did not take it out again for a long time. And I stopped recording. That's the part that frightened Tamsin into action, I think. Not the crying. She can weather my crying. She's been doing it since we were 11. But the silence. 400 voice notes and then nothing. She told me later that a quiet Effie is like a lighthouse that's gone dark, technically still standing, but the entire point of it has stopped. Tam let me be miserable for 6 of them, and then staged what she called an intervention, and I called being sat on. "Right," she said, moving my leg so she could occupy the sofa. "Tell me the story you're telling yourself, out loud, like your dad's machine but with judgment." So I told her that Rhea was right, that the gap was real, that I'd nearly ended her career by existing loudly near her, that the kind thing, the mature thing, was to let her leave clean. Tam listened all the way through, which is not her natural state, and then she said, "Okay, 2 things. 1, everything you just said is true." She held up a finger before I could feel vindicated. 2, it's also the exact same move you did in the stairwell. Something scared you, so you found the most responsible-sounding way to run, and you're calling it protecting her. You did it the first night. You're leaving in 6 weeks. You're doing it now. I'll let her go clean. Effie, you keep handing her a reason to leave and then being heartbroken that she takes it. I opened my mouth. "She kept the tape," Tam said, over me, relentless, loving. "She made 2 cups. She called you Effie. And when it got hard, you offered her the door before she could even ask for it because you're so certain it's going to cost you that you'd rather pay the bill early and skip the meal." She took my hand. "The review's going to clear. You said so. So the only thing standing in that room in 6 weeks is going to be the 2 of you, and whether either of you is brave." She said she's slow. "Fine. She's slow," Tam squeezed. "What's your excuse?" The review cleared. Of course it cleared. There was nothing to find because the crime was 2 cups of tea and a woman noticing my vowels. And even universities can't file paperwork on that. She had 11 days left when it cleared. I know because Bernie told me in the corridor, without being asked, in the tone of a woman rolling a grenade gently toward 2 people who won't pick it up. "She's cleared, fully, not a mark." She stamped something with unnecessary force. "She's also packing up her office. Ships her books Thursday, flies Friday." She looked at me over her glasses. "I've booked the movers for 4 o'clock, which gives a person, hypothetically, from 5 a window." She went back to her stamping. "Hypothetically." And here is where I stopped running. I didn't plan a speech. I'm suspicious of speeches. They're the sound of a person who's decided what they mean in advance. And she taught me the truth lives in the working, not the answer. So I did the only thing I know how to do, honestly. I took my dad's orange recorder, and I pressed the worn button, and I recorded 11 minutes. The same length, that wasn't on purpose, but I'm not sorry. Of the truest thing I had. Not about her eyes this time, about the running, about the stairwell and the door I kept holding open for her out of fear dressed as decency, about how nothing good is free and I'd been trying to get her for free without paying the part where I stand still and let it cost me. And I ended it with the only sentence I was sure of. "You said say it on purpose or take it back. I'm done taking it back. I sat on the left because I wanted to see you. I want to see you when you're not a professor and I'm not a student and there's no desk. I'll come to the colder, more important place. I'll come to any place. Just this time I'm not sending this to the wrong person." And then I did the bravest thing I've ever done, which was to send it to the right one on purpose. She was in her office at 5:10, exactly as Bernie's hypothetical had promised, surrounded by boxes, the wall of index cards half stripped, the plant. I noticed, my chest doing something complicated. The plant packed carefully in a box of its own, alive, saved after all. She had her phone in her hand. She'd heard it. I could tell she'd heard it because she was standing very still, in the way she stood when something had gotten past the guard. "You sent me a voice note," she said. "On purpose this time," I said. "I checked the name 11 times. 11. The corner of her mouth. You do like the number. It's a good number. Things happen at 11. I stayed in the doorway, because some geographies you have to be invited across. I'm not asking you to stay. I know you can't. I'm asking you to not pretend you didn't hear me. You said you'd never do that. You said it the first day. My voice did the thing. I let it, lid open. So I'm standing here meaning something out loud, on purpose, in front of the one person who can actually tell the difference. Rhea, I heard you too, the whole time. Under the surgical voice, I heard you. She crossed the room. This time I remember the geography exactly, every step, because I'd earned it. She stopped in front of me and she reached up and her thumb moved once across my cheekbone. Careful, the stopped clock winding, and she said, I did a cowardly thing. I dressed it as protecting you. I'm a professor of meaning and I lied to us both with a technicality. This was a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. It was the truest accident of my life and I tried to file it as an error. Her forehead came down against mine. I'm still leaving on Friday. That part is real. I don't have a version where it's simple. I don't want simple, I said. I want true. You taught me the difference. It was very inconvenient of you. And she laughed. Actually laughed, out loud, the whole thing. Not the hairline mercy at the corner of the mouth, but the real event. And I felt it against my own face, and I understood I would be spending a truly unreasonable amount of my life trying to cause that sound again. Come to the colder place, she said, into the space between us. Not as my student. That door's shut, thank God. Come because you can hear me. Do you know how rare that is? I've been in rooms full of the cleverest people alive and been completely alone in every one of them. And then a girl with her father's tape recorder sent me 11 minutes by accident and I wasn't. Anymore. Her thumb at my jaw, still. I kept the recording. I lied about deleting it, obviously. It's the most honest thing anyone's ever given me, and it wasn't even meant for me. I want the ones that are. I did go to the colder, more important place in the end. Not that Friday. I had a degree to finish, and she had a life to unpack. And we did the unglamorous adult work of a long distance measured in trains and voice notes for the better part of a year, which is a story with fewer stairwells and more logistics, and I'll spare you the timetable. But I'll tell you one train, because it mattered more than the rest. 3 months into the colder city arrangement, we had our first real fight, conducted over the phone, with 400 miles between us, ostensibly about scheduling and actually about fear. I'd gone quiet. That's my particular tell, the exact opposite of hers. I go silent where she goes precise. I'd stopped sending the little voice notes, and she'd noticed, because she notices everything. And she'd said, on the phone, in the flat voice, "You've closed the lid? You're doing the thing you accused me of. You're arranging yourself before you'll let me hear you." And I'd said something defensive and stupid, and we'd hung up badly, which we had never once done. And I'd sat in my student flat with the orange recorder in my hand and, for the first time in years, not pressed the button. And then, at 11 o'clock at night, of course it was 11, it is always 11, I've made my peace with the number, there was a knock, and it was her. Gray coat, collar up, a train ticket still in her pocket that she'd bought at the station in a temper. 400 miles on no notice, standing in the rain in a corridor that wasn't hers, looking furious and frightened and completely undone in a way I had only ever glimpsed at the very edges of her. "I don't do this," she said. "I don't chase. I have never once chased. I arrange, and I wait, and if it doesn't come to me, I decide that I never wanted it. That's the system. It's a good system. It kept me safe for 19 years. She was breathing hard. And then you went quiet, and I got on a train, because the thought of you arranging yourself somewhere I couldn't reach was worse than every principle I own. Her thumb was moving fast across the watch band, back and forth. So, this is me, being a much worse listener because I am too frightened to be a good one. Are you going to let me in? Or am I going to have made this entire journey in order to be correct at a closed door, which would be extremely on brand for me and I don't think I'd ever fully recover? I let her in. Obviously, I let her in. And that was the night I finally understood it was never going to be one grand rescue, hers or mine. It was going to be this, over and over, for as long as we were lucky, Two people who armor up in opposite directions, learning slowly and badly and on purpose to take it off in the same room. But I'll tell you how it settled, because you stayed, and you should get the exhale. Her flat in the colder city has a window that looks over a river instead of a moor. There's a wall, not index cards anymore. She says the cards were for when she thought meaning was something you pinned down and studied from a safe distance. A wall of photographs and records, my dad's records, because they live here now. The Nina Simone included. My cousin was very understanding. Bernie sends a card every Christmas. She addresses it to both of us, to Professor Sinclair and the foolish one. And the first year I was almost offended, and then I had it framed, because Bernie doesn't waste words. And the foolish one from Bernie lands closer to a blessing than most people's wedding vows. Inside that first card, in the hand of a woman who stamped 40 years of forms and watched clever people be stupid about each other the entire time, she'd written, "She made 2 cups. I told you. B." It's on the shelf by the door now, next to the recorder. Rhea claims she finds it sentimental. She has read it considerably more times than I have. I've caught her. And there's a card in a drawer I don't frame, the one that says precise, well heard, green pen, red ink, no first name. The one she gave me during the 9 days, when she was letting me go clean. I kept it. I keep everything. It's the whole affliction. But I took it out once, last winter, and showed it to her, and she went quiet. And then she took the pen off the shelf and added, under her own cold verdict, in the same green pen, 1 word and a name that wasn't a surname. It says now, precise, well heard, stay, Effie. She didn't explain it. She didn't have to. I taught her, without meaning to, that the truest things are the ones you send on purpose. There is a pot of tea that gets made and occasionally still forgotten, because some things don't change, and I've stopped needing them too. And there is an orange tape recorder on the shelf by the door, cracked corner, 1 button worn pale, because I don't send her voice notes anymore. I don't have to arrange my voice for a machine and hope it reaches the right Sinclair. She's the only Sinclair now. I just say the thing, out loud, in the room, to her. Last week I was thinking out loud in the kitchen, lid open, rambling about nothing, about oats, about the moral standing of the word moist, and I looked up and she'd stopped what she was doing, and she was just watching me, cold gone out of her entirely, the scar catching the light from the left, and she said, quiet, the way she used to say it across a cold office when I stumbled into something true. She said, there. And I said, what? And Rhea Sinclair, professor of meaning, keeper of the accidental recording, the most careful woman in any room, put down what she was holding and crossed the kitchen and took my face in both hands. And she said the 2 words she's been saying since the day I sent the wrong person that the truest thing I had, the 2 words I'll be listening for the rest of my life. I heard you, she said, and this time I let her.